Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new books by indie authors. Your hostess for today's show is Charlotte Canion. We do hope you enjoyed today's show.
I'm your host, award-winning author, speaker, and actress Charlotte Canion. And today our guest is Jeff Konkol. He is a writer of sci-fi fantasy stories that will just keep you spellbound. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started into your books, our listeners like to hear a little bit of your background. So can you tell us a little bit how you grew up? And, I noticed you have a musical instrument back there behind you, so I'm sure that played a part in your upbringing.
Yeah, that played a really large part in my upbringing, actually. So I grew up in Milwaukee, or suburb of Milwaukee, been here all my life. Music has been a passion of mine. So I played this thing for, well, not this particular piano, but for over 40 years now. So that's really been one of the things that's anchored me and kind of defined my life and kept me going, and good times and bad times.
So you play when you're in a mood or something?
Yeah. I find it's one of the better ways to process moods, to work out emotions, good and bad, because I think we all have those.
That is life. Yes, that is life. I'm a gardener, so I know exactly what you're talking. I go to my garden for my happy place.
Right. Yeah, when you need to put things aside and think things through, that's where you would go. Yeah, for this is emotional, and if I need to work something out, that's how I do it. Because I think my road has been a little bit different than most, particularly as how I came to writing and what I was doing. A lot of my writing was in hospital rooms. So I'm a widower, and that was it wasn't fast. So I did have a different road and a lot of emotions to work out. And, I think I've done as best as anyone can do. Life's a contact sport. But that's where a lot of my writing actually took place, at least initially.
Yeah. Well, I read your bio a little bit, so I understand that you had 16 years of caring for your wife. I'm a caregiver, and that's what my writing is about, is caregiving. And my book's called You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying. And, you were talking about emotions, and that's exactly, what it is. Now, did you start playing the piano when you were very, very young?
Yes. I started when I was young, and I drifted away from it. And then at one point I decided, I'm not getting any younger, and this is something that was important in my life. And I really decided to relearn. I went to a conservatory of music where they put quarters on your wrists and did all of that, and then really started to get a little bit better. And so now I'm in a pretty comfortable place. And I hope to play this and practice, the rest of my life.
Yeah. And I think I read in your bio you still perform. You're in an orchestra or
I'm in what I would call a piano support group. So all of the kind of like AA for concert pianists. And we're very fortunate. We've got a number of really, really good performers in the Milwaukee area. And we get together once a month or once every other month. And, you don't have to play, but you're welcome to. And it's a supportive environment. So it really kind of functions as our support group and gets us out there and gets us performing. And that's moving in the right direction. And a lot of those players now accompany for like the Milwaukee Ballet and do a lot of that. So it does open up that direction.
Oh, that is super. Okay, we're on the show for writing books. So when did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
Well, I got my degree in English, and I got it for the purpose of writing role-playing games. I was, when I was a kid, I played Dungeons and Dragons and all that, but I wanted to do it my own way. So I wrote my own game, and at that point I realized I could make games. I was very creative, but I didn't know how to write. So I went and got an English degree, which improved my writing, but that was still not the same kind of writing. So I made a decision, I'd say maybe 2004, with a game I was running with my friends and my wife at that time, and decided, hey, we're going to do this as a novel, and we're going to do all your characters as characters in this novel, and this story is going to develop into something. And we played for 6-7 years, and it was great, and I never wrote. I think that's common with many people, right? We want to write, we just never do. And then at, some point my wife was starting to get sick, and I was starting to look at life and decide, you know what, you only get one chance at this. And maybe I got a different appreciation. So I started that process of putting those words down on paper and working through those first couple of chapters, which are always hard. It's always that hard first step. And I really started to like it. It really started to take on, a momentum of its own. I found a good writer's workshop. I went through that process. I realized the value of, okay, I need other people to read this. I need an editor. And I started to learn the craft.
And you think, about what age were you when you think you started this process of writing?
When I started these novels, 45, when I actually put the first words to the pages. I knew what I wanted to write probably when I was 30. But, I waited like I think a lot of people do. Now, fortunately, that means I've got a lot of story to tell. So now it's a matter of actually the art of telling it.
Well, the only thing I know about, you mentioned you play Dungeons and Dragons. The only thing I know about Dungeons and Dragons is from Big Bang. Did any of the Dungeons and Dragons filter through to your stories? Yeah.
In fact, the stories I was telling with my players are many of the stories that are in this book. Over the course of, I think, 7 years I played with them, we get together every other Saturday and play for 5 hours. Those stories and those characters are now in this book. And much of the first 2 books were straight from the games that we played. Now everything is growing in a new life of its own now that I've got my feet under myself within this new medium, but it is really born out of those games. And it's not exactly like Big Bang Theory or Parks and Rec did a good Dungeons and Dragons episode 2, but they're not far off.
Okay. Well, I was reading one of the testimonies from one of the ladies, and she said your characters pull with the familiar teenage growing pains, struggling with self-confidence and personal issues, and then amaze you as they mature. Does that kind of describe how your books ebb and flow?
Yeah, at least the first book for sure. Well, and the second one as well. Because I set my characters up, and it's very much young adult initially. So the characters are maybe a little older than the Harry Potter characters would be. Okay. But it's a more vibrant, I would say, more violent world, but not like George R.R. Martin level of violence. But you do have the characters in that young adult trope of they have to be the ones to solve the problem. They're understanding the problem. But it branches out from there as they start to grow. And some of the characters are brothers, and they are dealing with a lot of those issues, particularly when they start to lose parents, because it is a pretty violent world, and they're relatively quickly put on their own, that they have to grapple with that loss and see how to proceed and see how they grow together as kind of as their own family.
Well, and it's something that I'm kind of picking up. Does it have a magical flair? Do they have gifts?
Yes. It would be classified as high magic. So most of the characters can use some form of magic. Because, it was built off of a game. The game has had a really, really involved magic system, so I was able to just kind of transport that over into my world. And there's fantastic monsters and creatures and a lot of danger that way. And as the characters become better at what they do, some of them become better magicians, some of them branch out in other directions.
Well, what's the name of the first book of the series?
Citadel of the Fallen.
Citadel of the Fallen. Sounds intriguing to me. Now, do you see this going on and being as big as, say, Harry Potter? You've got, wouldn't that be cool? I would say I knew someone famous, right? But you've got, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, the fame and success aside, as far as the amount of books I could write in the series, yeah, I could write 15 to 20 very, very easily. There's that much story there. There's that much ground to cover. And I'm planning on a minimum of 12. I think I've targeted it as 12, but as I'm starting to grow as a writer, I mean, I started out in that architect writer style where I charted everything out on paper and I knew where everything was supposed to be and what day and what minute everything happened. And, that was good. That was neat. And that helped me build a plot. But as I started to grow a little bit and experiment as a writer, I started to find certain characters that weren't on my pieces of paper were starting to take on a life of their own and growing in their own direction. So a lot of the art of it was learning, okay, when do I let these characters start to take over the page and start to shape the story on their own? And when do I stick to my plot line and my time, my timeline? And that is, enabled the books really to breathe.
Yeah. Well, that's super. Jeff, hold on a minute. We are going to be right back. We're going to give a brief word to our sponsors.
Sounds great.
Welcome to B4R.store, a bookstore for indie readers and indie authors, where indie authors can earn their fair share from the books you purchase. We have a wide variety of genres that you can select from. We also have ebooks and paperbacks. You can select authors by their first names, and we also have music. If you're interested in their city or country, we have that listed as well. If you are an author and would like to be on our bookstore, we have 3 options for you. There is a small minimal charge, or you can join our organization at authorsmarketing.org and learn how to better market and sell yourself. That is B4R.store, a bookstore for indie readers and indie authors.
Hi, I'm Charles Brakefield.
And I'm Rox Berkey.
Together, we write as Brakefield and Berkey.
Our techno-thriller series is 12 books strong, with book 13, The Enigma Tracer, planned for 2022.
Techno-thrillers are the cyber good guys versus today's darknet thugs.
We added our series prelude, Out of Poland, a 1939 historical novella, in 2021.
We also have 8 short stories available in family and women's contemporary genres, with more planned for 2022.
Please visit our website, enigmaseries.com, to learn more about why we say technology is today's weapon of choice. Thank you.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new books by indie authors. Your hostess for today's show is Charlotte Canion. We do hope you enjoyed today's show.
This is Charlotte Canion, and I've got the pleasure of speaking with Jeff, and he is a sci-fi fantasy storyteller. Now, if you didn't hear the first part, it's fascinating. In fact, we may have another Harry Potter series coming here. It's just wonderful. Jeff, tell us a little more about how you developed your first book, and then when you went into your second book, because I think you wrote it during COVID. Is that correct?
Yes. I started the second book in 2019 and wrote it through the rest of 2019 and into 2020. So right when we were starting to see COVID. In fact, the third book, again, this wasn't planned, but, I had a lot of this, well, it wasn't planned to coincide with COVID, but the third book actually deals with a city that's starting to succumb to an infection. So it just kind of worked out that way. But the first book, so when I was studying English, one thing I don't know why I remember this story, but there's a story called Linegan versus the Ants. And I think they gave it to us to show us man versus nature conflict, those things you study, in high school and early college English, right? And so it talks about ants as they surge across, millions and millions of ants surging across the Amazon, and a farmer there who doesn't want to let it happen. So he decides to fight them, and he puts up barricades around his plantation, and he tries to fight the ants off, and it doesn't really work out. So in a fantasy setting, anybody who's looked at Tolkien realizes all the insects are much bigger, right? Your spiders are giant. And I kind of thought, well, what happens if you have a fantasy version of the Amazon and all your ants are 2 to 3 feet long? What would that look like? And so I kind of looked at Linegan versus the ant and said, let's put this in a fantasy world and have this as that sort of Damocles, that conflict that the characters have to race against. this natural disaster that they have to prepare against. And of course, it sets up a much larger world. There's reasons it's happening, and the things that they do to deal with it all set lots of events into motion. But it kind of sets up this as the initial story of some kids realizing this is happening and being set on certain tasks to try to deal with it. So it creates a really interesting timeline and a real frenetic racing pace in book one.
Well, it sounds intriguing. I have to tell you, there was a movie they made from that story. I think Charlton Heston was the star in it. I don't remember, but it was.
You know what? I think you're right. I've seen it recently, or part of it recently.
Yeah, and it was a good story. I can imagine it with the bigger ants. But I'm gonna tell you what, those little ones, they did damage like you can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, so I can't even imagine in a sci-fi world how you can. One thing I always love to ask my guest is, do you have friends that you kind of use characteristics that they have in your characters in your book?
Well, yeah, particularly in this one, because since I had played out, a campaign with these friends, I told them from the start, okay, here are the roles you're playing. Here's a little bit of your backstory, but I want to see you play this. I want to see you act this out. This isn't just rolling dice and saying, my character does this. I want to see you act out these characters. And a lot of the people who did a better job and really developed strong interpersonal conflicts or friendships amongst one another, I've taken into the game and really started to branch out, where I was able to take those characteristics. I mean, like two of the players were playing Liam and Connor, who are brothers, and they just developed this entire younger brother, older brother. The mother died during childbirth, and so the one blames the other. I mean, all these, because they were adults playing these children, so they knew these serious issues. They'd read about them or seen them in movies, so they were getting to play them out and act them out. And a lot of that stuff is just, it's been really great to have that as a backdrop when I'm looking at these characters, of just remembering what did they do at this time and what issues did they play out and how did that affect the game and the dynamics between everybody at the table.
Yeah, and I don't want to bring up anything, but is your wife in the movie, in the stories? I see it as a movie now. Duh.
And I'm fine. I'd be happy with that. Yeah, she is. She played one of the characters, and I hope she lives on for. Well, I'm sure the characters can live on, but I hope she lives on for a long time in this world, because she was a really big part of it.
Okay, so you do have her living on now. How did you go from the first book to the second book and tie it in?
So there's a lot of fantasy series out there, urban fantasies in particular, where it's kind of formulaic. You have your storyline. It's kind of like an episode of Star Trek, right? You set everything up, and then the next episode, it's a new challenge, and a couple of things carried forward, but it's brand new. They can stand alone. In this series, they don't stand alone. The series continues. It's book two starts a couple of months after book one ends. And book three starts a couple of weeks after book two ends. I like to carry that story forward. There are challenges with that. I know a lot of authors, when they've done that, have had to have a huge section in the front of their books as what's come before, because you do want readers to be able to step in book two or three, without having read book one. So that's a challenge I'm going to face, because I am telling a real long, continuous story.
Well, is there anything other than your gaming that feeds to your sci-fi adventure?
Yeah, I'd say so. Certainly with characters I'm developing. I mean, I'm obviously really invested in the arts. With music as a background, so I'm playing with some of those, aspects with characters. I was an endurance athlete at one point. I'm not anymore. So there's a certain discipline and kind of a soldiery to that approach of you need to be up at 5 a.m. to train every single day, and so I've kind of carried that into certain characters, and just these other aspects, of life, which weren't necessarily from a game table.
Do you do your musical instrument? I mean, is there any kind of, anybody play an instrument in your books?
Not a piano. I haven't decided if I'm ever going to have one. I just don't think I want to throw a piano in this world. I don't know if they would have been.
It'd be hard to carry on your back, right?
Right. I mean, so there are some musical instruments, but it's not the same. I guess I might make a magical piano at some point.
You could. Oh, well, now where are you going to take us from here? You said
Okay.
now, do you have 3 books out or just the 2 I see?
Well, just the 2, and the 3rd book I just signed off on the cover and the final edits on the text actually today, about an hour ago. So that will be out May 19th, published by Black Rose Writing, just like the other 2. I'm really happy with how that came out. And that really expands the world, starts to give you, other issues to look at, starts to deal with the pandemic.
Right.
And see how that impacts everything. And then book 4, I'd say is about 50% done.
Okay.
Maybe 58,000 words into it. So then there'll be a lot of editing and cutting that down to get it to where it needs to be. But so I'd say about halfway done with that.
And are you introducing new characters or are you staying with all of the ones you saw in the first book?
I introduce new characters, but I'm trying to keep the pace of that manageable. I'm trying to eliminate characters is slightly slower, well, slightly faster than I add them. The world's going to keep expanding, particularly as you get into new areas and get into a city. So I'm adding characters, but I'm trying to avoid, here's a new book and here's 30 new characters you need to know. I just don't think anybody wants it to be homework, right? I don't think anybody wants to have to pull out a paper and pencil and map down who's this person and where do they know this person. And the other aspect of this book that makes it challenging, well, it's a benefit and a curse, I guess, is that it's telling history from its current timeline and from a past timeline when their world fell like 300 years ago. And the main characters, the kids, have been possessed by figures from the old world, the one that fell. So in each character, because I do change point of views per chapter, sometimes you get 2 point of views. You can actually have a conversation with just that character because that character is possessed and the spirit inside of them can talk to them, give them information, and they can argue and they can fight. So even if I only would have 6 characters, I really have 12 because, they've got a second personality to play with.
Gotcha there. Well, Jeff, we're going to have to take one more commercial and we'll be right back. And when we come back, Jeff's going to tell us how you can get in touch with him and how you can get your books.
Marianne Fairmouth is a career consultant with 30 years experience in the national recruiting world, a multi-award-winning author in multi-genres, and a speaker that gives presentations to help you succeed. Her book, Revolutionary Recruiting, made the top 20 global list of recruiting books. Find her on Amazon, your favorite bookstore, or at fairmouth.com.
Each and every one of us has a mission in life. Mine is to help people laugh through the good times and the bad. My name is Charlotte Canion, and I am an author, a speaker, and a host on Indie Beacon Radio. If you need me to speak at an event or autograph my book, you can contact me at charlotte@charlottecanion.com. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
Authors Marketing International, a membership-based organization where members learn how to better market and sell themselves. Join us at authorsmarketing.org.
This is Charlotte Canion, and it's been my pleasure to be speaking to Jeff Konkol. Jeff, I know you've won some awards for your books already. Can you tell us what awards you won? And then kind of tell us how people can get your books.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I originally entered the Maxi Awards and got a runners-up in that. And I entered the Pencraft Award as well. And right when book 1 came out, it got a Publisher's Weekly review, which was just, it kind of made my day because it was right next to the novelist I was reading all the time, Jim Butcher, with the Harry Dresden series. So it's one of those things where you wake up in the morning, you see it, you can't believe that this is happening, that you're right next to a famous author.
Someone you.
But yeah, I recently won first place for literary excellence in fantasy with the Pencraft, and that was a great surprise too. I kind of given up on submitting book one for more of these awards, and when I saw that one come through, I was really, really happy. As
So
far
it
as
kind of encouraged you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, very, very encouraging. So the books are available on Amazon. They're also available with my publisher, Black Rose Writing, which is blackrosewriting.com. And as far as kind of keeping track of me, easiest way is my website. That's www.jrkonkol, it's KONKOL.com. And some of the things we're doing on the website, we're experimenting a little bit. So I did mention that my stories continue, from book one to book two without much of a break. So what I'm doing is I'm putting a chapter by chapter summary of the previous book on the website, just leaving it up there. So when book two came out, I put a chapter by chapter summary of book one. When book three comes out, book one and two will be up there. And I want to kind of keep going forward and use the website to do that as opposed to print a 7 to 10 page what has come before section, which I don't think a lot of people like to read those. And this will be a nice way for people to reference back. And then we're also building a wiki. So since my world is my own, it's populated with all its monsters and its spells, I put those things up there. So people, if they like the world and want to read about it, they can go, and there's a wiki there that's being built with every new book that comes out. The critters that were in that book will show up on that website. We'll see how successful that is. There's many times I've wished when reading a science fiction or fantasy novel that was out there. And eventually, if those books get popular, other people do it. They'll crowdsource and build their own wiki. But I wanted to start, right away in doing that, particularly with putting in the chapter by chapter summary, so people can jump in without feeling forced to read the first book. And then, like they jump into book two, and if they like it, I really want them to go back and read book one. But I want to give them that summary so they can enjoy book two first, if that's what they want to do.
That is, I like the way you're doing your process, and I wish you all good luck in the world. I always ask my authors to give me in one sentence or two at the max, what advice would you give a young author, or say someone writing their first book? What advice would you give them?
I think it's standard advice, but it's so true. Just start writing that first chapter, and don't worry about it. Don't worry at all. Know that you are going to rewrite that first chapter. So you've got nothing to lose. You're going to write the first chapter, and you're going to write the second chapter. And when you write that second chapter, you're going to know far more about writing in the third chapter, far more than the second. So just don't worry about it. Don't be self-conscious, because you're going to rewrite that, because you're going to learn as you go. It is an art. Just like a lot of things in life are work that way.
Well, Jeff, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for being on the show. And I'm your host, Charlotte Canion. And remember, a rose is like a book. You can't know its beauty until you look at it. But a book is like a rose. You won't know its full beauty until you open it. Until next time, stay safe. Bye for now.
Thank you for watching the Indie Beacon Show, produced by B. Allen Bourgeois for the Authors Marketing International, LLC. Copyright 2022. Voiceover by B. Allen Bourgeois. If you would like to be a sponsor of the show, please contact us at authorsmarketing@outlook.com. If you would like to be on this show, it is free to authors. Simply fill out the form at indiebeacon.com. The music is provided by Happy Follows. The music is entitled